So good morning. This is my fourth session of 5. We're getting toward the end. This session is Windows RT in the enterprise. So for today's session, we want to explore what is Windows RT and how does it fit in an enterprise environment. Really, to get started talking about that, though, we need to go through some of the positioning of the different versions of Windows 8 and Windows RT that are out there and understand the type of functionality that's available in those different versions. So fortunately, we've simplified things a little bit. If you've looked at this compared to, say, Windows 7, we have less SKUs of Windows available now. We have the core one, the Windows 8, the low-end entry-level version of Windows 8, which is roughly corresponding to Windows RT as far as functionality goes. So if you were to go out and buy a low-end laptop or desktop, it would come with Windows 8. The same basic functionality will be present in Windows RT. The big difference is Windows RT also adds Office 2013 Home and Student inbox by default, and it subtracts any additional desktop applications. Because the ARM operating system, the Windows RT operating system on ARM devices doesn't run desktop applications beyond what's included in the operating system. So the next step up then would be Windows 8 Pro. Most enterprises would use at least Windows 8 Pro because that adds capabilities like domain join, group policy, offline files. In the case of Windows 8, now BitLocker has been added into Windows 8 Pro, so that's not an enterprise-only feature anymore, and it adds remote desktop in as well. Windows 8 Pro is actually available in a retail version as well as a volume activation version, so you can actually activate it in either way. The next step up then would be Windows 8 Enterprise, which adds direct access, app locker, branch cache, Windows to go, the ability to add MDOP on top of that, and sideloading capabilities that we talked about yesterday afternoon, if you were in that session. So you can probably tell from the picture that using Windows RT isn't going to have the same level of functionality that you would have with a Windows 8 Enterprise or even a Windows 8 Pro machine. You're going to be giving up some things to use a Windows RT device. That doesn't mean this device doesn't have any place for an enterprise. It just means that you need to be able to consider the capabilities of the device as part of the selection process. So then what we really need to do is understand the types of devices that are out there. There are actually 3. At the lower end as far as weight and higher end for battery life, we have the tablet devices running either Windows RT with ARM processors or Windows 8 tablets using Intel Atom processors. Both of these are designed for long battery life, lightweight. One runs Windows RT, so it's not going to be running additional desktop applications. It's not going to support Windows 8 Pro. It's not going to support Windows 8 Enterprise. Windows 8 on an Atom processor is going to offer those levels of support. The higher end then becomes tablets running Intel Core 64-bit processors, which can run all of your existing desktop applications, as can the Intel Atom-based machines, but will run them much faster because these Intel Core processors are significantly speedier, generally, the machines have a lot more memory in them, larger amounts of disk space, so they're just higher-end Ultrabook or desktop replacement type machines. So we have these 3 different categories of devices, and we really need to help you then pick which device is appropriate for different scenarios inside of your enterprise. There's not going to be necessarily one device that's used across all scenarios. You may pick and choose between these 3 different categories based on the specific scenario. So you need to be able to choose between them by first figuring out what are the important needs. And this gets a little small even when you display it on a 12-foot screen, but the main categories then are mobility, workload, apps, connectivity, and manageability. From a mobility perspective, do you want a machine that's the lightest weight, that has the longest battery life, that can run all day on a single battery charge? From a workload perspective, do you want to be able to run just casual applications? Do you just use email and web browsing or lighter weight applications? Or do you need to open up the multi-megabyte, thousands of row spreadsheet, larger databases? Do you need that type of processing horsepower to do more intensive work? From an application perspective, do you need to be able to run more desktop applications? Because Windows RT can't run those, at least not directly, without using something like Remote App. So choosing based on the app requirements is really going to be key as well. From a connectivity perspective, Windows RT has support for making a VPN connection, but it doesn't include direct access. You need to be able to look at those types of capabilities and use those to make the decision as to which device is going to be most appropriate. The last category, and the one that really plays into most enterprises' decision making, is manageability. If you look at a Windows 8 based device, you can manage that with Configuration Manager. You can manage that with Windows Intune. You can manage that through Exchange ActiveSync. You can manage that with third-party management tools. You can manage that with group policy. You can join Active Directory. You can do all of these different things. In the case of Windows RT, it's much simpler. Windows RT can be managed using Windows Intune. It can be governed using Exchange ActiveSync. But that's about it. So you can't join it to Active Directory, you can't use group policy, you can't do some of the more advanced management capabilities that you probably take for granted today on your Windows 8 Pro or Windows 8 Enterprise or Windows 7 Pro or Enterprise machines. So once we've looked at those 5 different categories, then we can choose a type of device that best meets the specific capabilities that are most important for you. For mobility, Atom-based machines or Windows RT tablets are going to be best. For workload, anything running an Intel Core processor is going to offer you the best power. For apps, anything running Windows 8 is going to be able to run any desktop application that you currently have, plus all of the new Windows 8 full UI, touch-enabled, immersive store apps. If you're going to choose Windows RT, well, then you can only run the store apps plus the included Office, Home, and Student. From a connectivity perspective, Windows 8 tablets with Windows 8 Enterprise on them get direct access. Any device can make a VPN connection, although you do need to keep in mind that there are some limitations with the VPN connections from Windows RT. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get deeper into this. There are some advantages to Atom-based devices and Windows RT-based devices because they support an operating mode called Connected Standby. Connected Standby basically means that when you put the machine to sleep, it's still active. It still wakes up periodically, talks to the network, the applications can do things, they can receive email, they can remind you of calendar appointments, they can do all kinds of stuff, kind of like your phone does. When you turn off your phone, when you hit the power button, you're not physically powering the phone off because then you wouldn't be able to receive phone calls. It continues to run in a very low power state for an extended period of time. That's supported on all Windows RT devices and all Intel Atom-based devices. That connected standby state, though, isn't yet supported on Intel Core-based devices. That'll require another generation of hardware from Intel where they can create Intel Core processors that have lower power consumption, have those lower powered states, and can operate in that connected standby state for a longer period of time. And then on the manageability side, if you need complete full manageability, Windows 8 devices are going to give you the most flexibility. If you just need simple manageability, using Windows Intune with either Windows 8 or Windows RT devices is certainly doable. And for all of these, you can do governance just by using Exchange ActiveSync. So you would kind of go through this grid for every scenario, every group of people inside of your enterprise and figure out, well, maybe one group of people is well their needs are well met by a Windows RT device, because they do email, they do web browsing, they need to keep up, they need to communicate, but they don't run a whole lot of applications beyond what you can get through the Windows Store. But another group, a group of developers, a group of accountants, probably need access to many more applications, need to be able to run more powerful applications that have higher memory, higher CPU, higher disk requirements. They may need Intel Core-based devices. Okay, with that said, let's dig deeper into Windows RT. You can probably already tell just from the discussion that Windows RT devices are designed to have very long battery life. They're designed to be thin, sleek, lightweight. They come pre-configured. So we say that they're high quality and have a predictable experience over time. Basically, they're shipped from the OEM with an operating system image pre-installed on it. There are no deployment tools for Windows RT devices. You can't build your own Windows RT image and place that onto an ARM-based device. You have to use the operating system that is provided by the OEM. So that effectively means that the deployment process for a Windows RT device is open the box, turn it on. Nice, easy, but you can't really do the types of customizations that you would have typically done with Windows 8 or Windows 7, where you'd create your gold image with your standard set of applications. You would have to do that after the device has been powered on and initialized. But it is designed to be very well configured to get that optimal battery life, to get the best experience, and to make sure that that experience doesn't degrade over time because of additional background processing, additional apps that drain the machine by just doing lots of unnecessary stuff. It's really focused on efficiency, focused on battery life, making sure that over time this machine doesn't go from, say, an 8-hour battery life down to maybe a 5-hour, 4-hour, 3-hour as time goes by. We want to make sure that you continue to have a good experience. As far as the functionality goes, there's a lot in common between Windows RT and Windows 8. We have the same UI, we have the same desktop environment, we have the same modern UI environment. Windows Store apps, the majority of them will run both on Windows RT and Windows x86 machines, Windows 8 machines. The developers generally write these apps using Visual Studio, using C#. These apps are by default cross-platform. They could also start to use HTML and JavaScript, so if you have web developers, they can now much more easily create these Windows Store apps to run on these devices. There's also a high level of support for peripherals, and we've tried to make sure that for these peripherals, you don't need to add drivers. There are no third-party drivers for Windows RT. The only drivers that you have for Windows RT are those that are included by Microsoft in the box. Those that are included in the box are now class drivers. So we have one driver that can support a whole set of devices, including printers, mass storage devices, USB drives, USB keys, smart cards, lots of different device types, keyboards, mice, cameras, microphones, any type of device that you plug in traditionally to an existing Windows 8 or Windows 7 PC. You should also be able to plug into Windows RT, and most of them will be compatible. Not all of them, but we do have a website out there, a compatibility center for both Windows 8 and Windows RT, that will show you which devices we've tested, which ones should be compatible with Windows RT, and also which ones are compatible with Windows 8. So you can check those out ahead of time. So thin, light, sleek, long battery life. It includes class drivers for most peripherals. From a security perspective, these are set up with secure boot by default and measured boot by default. These machines all support UEFI. In fact, they require UEFI. And they also include a TPM chip. It's required for any machine that supports connected standby to have a TPM chip. So all Windows RT devices have TPM. All Windows 8 Atom-based devices have TPM. Some Intel Core-based machines have TPM because that's not a requirement. As an enterprise, if you're using TPMs with BitLocker, if you're using TPMs with Direct Access, if you're using TPMs for anything, you can be assured that all of these Windows 8 and Windows 8 Atom and Windows RT devices will include this TPM capability. We'll look at what we can do with that when we get a little deeper into this. So we've talked about the apps. Generally, apps developed for Windows 8 will also run on Windows RT. There is also sideloading capability. So if you went to my session yesterday afternoon where we talked about being able to install apps on the device from a location other than the Windows Store, Windows RT supports that as well. In order to enable that, you have to install a sideload product key. Those sideload product keys are provided as a software assurance benefit when you're using a Windows RT device as a companion device to an existing Windows 8 system. If you don't have software assurance, or if this is not a companion device to a device that does have software assurance, you can purchase those sideload keys as well to enable you then to install apps through other means. Like maybe you're using Windows Intune and you want to push out apps to these devices via Windows Intune. You can specify the sideload key. You can actually input that sideloading key into Windows Intune, and Windows Intune will automatically install it on the machines before it installs the first app on the device. The devices do support multiple accounts. So just like any other Windows 8 device, you can create as many local accounts as you want. It also now supports, on all Windows 8 and Windows RT systems, the ability to log in with live accounts, with Microsoft accounts. So if you want to have one account with the same settings that roam across multiple Windows RT and Windows 8 devices, you can actually add a live account, add that Microsoft account into Windows RT and log in with that directly. That doesn't require you to be internet connected after the first time. You can basically log in with cache credentials like you could with your domain accounts. So that is a good option for making sure that your settings roam, but also making sure that you have just one password to worry about between these devices. There is a built-in mail client. So there's a mail app that's included in Windows 8 as well as in Windows RT. That mail app isn't Outlook. It doesn't have all of the advanced functionality of Outlook, but it does a decent job of providing the basic mail functionality that you would need, both to connect to IMAP-based mail services like Hotmail, Outlook.com, Gmail, but also to connect to Exchange via ActiveSync. So it includes the capability of doing both of those. We continue to improve that over time. The most recent release of that came out a couple of weeks ago, which added things like support for IRM mail and better global address book integration, the ability to do free busy search lookup. So we're continuing to add additional functionality to that to make sure that it's a more robust experience. So let's take a quick tour of Windows RT. Let's just look at the UI. For those of you who haven't looked at Windows 8 much, you really won't see a whole lot that's different between Windows RT and Windows 8 because they're the same basic functionality. In fact, I've been doing the presentation on my Windows RT device. I'm using my Surface for this session, so in order to do this demo, I need to escape out of my slideshow. And we can go to the start screen. So this is a Windows RT device. I've configured this. I use this pretty much every day. The first thing that generally hits people is the start screen because it's different than what you were experiencing in the past with the start menu. So the first thing is, well, I don't know how to get to the start screen because there's no more start button, but we've got lots of ways to get to the start screen. We can swipe from the right and click on Start. We can push the Windows button on the actual hardware to get there. There's a Windows key on the keyboard that will take us back and forth between the last application that we were looking at and the start screen, so fairly easy to cycle back and forth between those. So really easy to get to. Once you get to it, we can navigate back and forth between the different tiles. We can pinch to look at the larger set of icons that I've set up. And then we can even do things like, well, maybe I want to name one of these. So I can select it just by dragging down a little bit and clicking to name the group. And then I could either type on my keyboard or I could bring up an on-screen keyboard. Since I have a keyboard attached, I might as well type it. We'll just say common items and assign a name to that. Maybe I have another one over here that I want to call personal stuff. Then we can zoom back out again and we can see the names over those particular groups. Now the start screen itself is designed to be a lot more useful than it was in the past with the start menu. We're actually displaying live information on this screen. So I can see the mail app, I can see the emails that are waiting for me. If I click on the mail app, it will launch and I can see multiple mail accounts that I've set up on this machine. I can see emails, I can see calendar appointments, which I can accept or reject. I can do the standard email functionality. I could even switch over to my Exchange account, my Microsoft account, and hopefully no bad emails show up at the top of my personal inbox. But we can do whatever we need as far as email goes with our Outlook.com, our live accounts, as well as the Microsoft accounts. So very easy to use that mail app. If we want to close an app, we can swipe from the top of the screen, which causes it to shrink like this. I'm just holding my finger on the screen at this point. If I keep going and throw it off the bottom of the screen, the application closes. You can also do the same thing by swiping and getting a list of the applications on the right side and closing it from there just by right-clicking on it. But you can cycle between the applications by swiping from the left. We can bring up the charms by swiping from the right. Maybe we want to go to the start menu. We can swipe from the right, go to settings. There aren't too many settings on the start screen. We can configure from there. Maybe we want to show the administrative tools on the start screen. Maybe we don't. Easy enough to do. We have a version of Internet Explorer built in. So we actually have two versions of Internet Explorer. We have the touch-enabled version, which is full screen, immersive, fully supports touch. We can zoom in and out using our fingers by pinching. We also have a desktop environment. From the desktop environment, we can run the standard desktop version of Internet Explorer. We had actually pushed out an update to Internet Explorer, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago now, that fully enables Flash for all websites. Initially, the Flash support that we had was only for a limited number of websites that we had whitelisted, but we've changed that now so that all websites that have Flash in them will be enabled by default, although certain ones can still be blacklisted if they cause issues with the operating systems. So if you are really into these excessive Flash sites, which I've got a couple of them pinned here, they'll run just fine with Windows RT-based devices after those updates are installed without having to worry about talking to the vendor, telling them to add their site to the whitelist so that these particular sites can be displayed. So Flash support is there. Flash support's pretty good. There is no support, though, for any other plugins in Internet Explorer in Windows RT. So if you use Java inside of any web pages, if you use Java on the desktop, if you use Silverlight, any other types of plugins won't be available on Windows RT, just Flash-based capabilities provided through Internet Explorer. Okay, what else do we need to look at? If we go to Settings, there's a link at the bottom that says Change PC Settings. This is basically the new control panel where we can customize the operating system configuration. Now, 100% of the configuration items aren't yet in this, so we still had to go back to the legacy control panel in some cases, but at least most of the common operations are here. So maybe we want to go to users. We can set up a picture password, which it wants me to verify my current password. Choose a picture, which I can grab from SkyDrive. What pictures do I have out here? I noticed the other day that there was a Surface ad at the Fashion Show Mall, so I will use that picture for my picture password. And then I can put 3 gestures on this picture, and those 3 gestures take the place of typing in my password, which makes it a lot faster for me to log in. So just for simplicity, my 3 gestures, I'll touch the fashion show, I'll touch the word Surface, and I'll draw a line across the roof or whatever that is. Then I need to repeat it again to make sure that I still remember what I did. And now it says, congratulations, you've successfully created your picture password. So now if my machine were to lock or time out, or if I put it to sleep and wake it back up again, it'll then just have me touch the screen to unlock the machine. This is a convenience feature. This convenience feature is convenient, but that doesn't mean that it's something enterprises would really like, because there's concerns. Is it secure enough? Does it meet our corporate security requirements? So fortunately, it's something that you can disable via Exchange Active Sync policies. Now, you can't disable it via group policy because Windows RT is not a member of Active Directory. As a result, it doesn't process group policies. It does process local policies, so you could create a local policy and set the group policy agent service to start up so that it processes those, but it's just as easy to set them through Exchange Active Sync settings. Okay. So we also have a variety of other applications that are available on here from an enterprise perspective. Some of the ones that may be of interest are things like Skype. OneNote is available from the store. There is a link application that's available in the store. Adobe, a variety of other applications that may be useful. We'll talk about some of the remaining ones here as we get deeper into this, but let me first just move this one that somehow ended up in the wrong place. Yeah. Let me move it back over into the right place. So I have to tear it away from its current spot and just drag it into the location that I want it to be in. So from the desktop perspective, I mentioned before that there was an existing desktop control panel that's still around. The easiest way, though, to actually find the items that I'm looking for is to just start typing from this start screen. If I don't happen to have a keyboard attached, I could also swipe from the right and click on search. But if I just typed control, it will show me all of the items that are in all applications that have the word control in them. So I can then click on control panel and bring up the existing control panel. So this is really the same control panel that you would see on Windows 8. It just contains all of the advanced settings that aren't yet in that modern UI, that PC settings experience that we were looking at before. Okay, let me switch back over to PowerPoint. And pick up where we left off. Let's talk a little bit more about Office. So Office is pre-installed on Windows RT. The initial version, when you first get the machine out of the box and turn it on, is a preview release. So you will need to install an update from Windows Update to install the RTM version of Office Home and Student 2013. Once that's installed, you'll have the released versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. Notice that there's no Outlook in that. It is Home and Student at this point doesn't include Outlook. As far as the use rights go, Office Home and Student is, not surprisingly, licensed for home and student use, not for business use. For business use, you need to have commercial use rights. In order to get commercial use rights, you need to have an appropriate volume license agreement for Office in your enterprise. That could be an Office 365 subscription, whether it's Pro Plus, Small Business Premium, Mid-Size Business, Enterprise E3, E4, different subscription types will satisfy that requirement. Or it could be an Office Standard or Professional Plus 2013 volume license agreement, which includes secondary use rights, which would cover these Windows RT devices running the Office RT version. So once you have those commercial use rights, then you're allowed to use it for enterprise use. There's nothing that really prevents you from using Office in any way before that. It's really just a licensing term that's associated with the device that says that you're not supposed to use this for business unless you have these use rights added. So as far as the Office capabilities go, we've been using PowerPoint, and really it includes the standard capabilities that we would expect in PowerPoint. We also have Excel and Word and OneNote. So no big surprises as far as the functionality goes in these versions. The only things that would be missing are some macro capabilities have been removed because they weren't appropriate on Windows RT devices. And things that are more enterprise functionality, like creating DRM protected documents, aren't supported in Office Home and Student. It can read them, it can open them, but it can't actually create a DRM protected file. But it is fairly easy to open up a document, like one of the white papers that we've been working on, and we get the full typical experience. Office 2013 does have some improved touch support to make sure that it's easier on touch devices, so I can pin the ribbon in place on my Windows RT device, and when it's in touch mode, it expands out all the controls so that they're easier for me to click on. I can zoom in and out with my fingers on the document, I can scroll with my fingers, so we do get a decent touch experience for what is basically a desktop application. Since I also have mouse and keyboard available to me, I can use that as well. We'll take a little bit closer look at this document later on, but it's one of the things we're trying to do is pull together all the information around Windows RT in the enterprise into one place, which right now is this document. We'll convert that into TechNet pages and hopefully post that in the coming weeks to tell you, here's everything you need to know about Windows RT. Read through this and make sure that you understand what it can and can't do, which is a lot of what we're going through in this session as well. So we have Excel, PowerPoint, Word, OneNote, the same basic functionality that you would expect. For whatever reason, it wasn't my default for opening spreadsheets. It wants to make itself the default, which is fine with me. This does integrate with SkyDrive, so it can open files from the cloud using SkyDrive. It can also talk to SkyDrive Pro to open and close files that are saved on your SharePoint sites, but there are no sync clients available on Windows RT at this point. So offline use of SkyDrive and SkyDrive Pro doesn't work quite so well as it would on Windows 8 or Windows 7 because you don't have that offline copy of your entire library. That's something that we'll be working on in the future to make sure that you can use these with your cloud data offline just as easily as you can on Windows 8 or Windows 7. Okay, let's go back to PowerPoint. Resume my slideshow. And talk a little bit more about connectivity. So I mentioned before that you can make a VPN connection from your Windows RT device into your corporate network. In order to do that, you would be using the inbox Microsoft VPN client. That VPN client is able to make connections with Microsoft Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, 2012 VPN servers, as well as third-party VPN servers, but using certain protocols only. It supports the standard protocols, PPTP, L2TP, and IKEv2, also called IPsec. For other communication protocols, other VPN protocols like SSL-based VPNs, the inbox VPN client that we provide doesn't support those. So if you're using something like Cisco AnyConnect today, or an F5 VPN, or additional devices like that that require SSL VPNs with special client software that you install on Windows 7 or Windows 8, you won't be able to install that software on Windows RT. So you won't be able to use those to make your VPN connection. You would need to use the inbox client using PPTP, L2TP, or IKEv2. That's a little bit of a headache for enterprises. We acknowledge that. That's something that we're working on, working with those vendors so that they can create additional VPN clients that we can provide in Windows RT. No time frames yet on that. It's a long-term goal to make sure that we can support additional VPN connectivity styles. As far as configuring those VPN connections, generally they would be done manually. We'll look at the wizard that you would use to set those up, but you can also push out those VPN configurations using Windows Intune. So if you're using Windows Intune, you can define that VPN connection through Configuration Manager and have the Configuration Manager connector tell Intune to push those out to the devices. We also include support for multi-factor authentication. We can do smart cards in Windows RT as long as they support the two general standards, PIV and GIDS, which are generally used by government institutions to enable smart card authentication. We can also use virtual smart cards. So using the TPM chip that's available in these devices, we can create a virtual smart card on the TPM chip, store certificates in that virtual smart card where it's actually stored in the VPN chip with a pin attached to it, and for all intents and purposes behaves exactly like a physical smart card. All the same benefits without having to carry around a smart card reader and the smart card itself, because it's included, it's in the TPM. So let's take a look at both of those options. If we wanted to create a VPN connection, easiest way is we can search. If I click on settings, I can see the options that have the word virtual in them. So set up a virtual private network connection, runs a wizard where we can type in the address of the VPN server that we want to connect to. We can give it a friendly name. We can say that it requires smart card authentication if we want. We can make it machine-wide or just available for the current user. I don't actually have a functioning VPN server to connect to at the moment. We'll get that one taken care of in the near future. I just got the email from our internal IT organization yesterday saying I've now been provisioned for VPN access as soon as I get my supervisor's permission to do that. So working on that. We'll get there. But then as far as the virtual smart cards go, that one's a little bit more interesting. So okay, how do you create a virtual smart card? Well, let's bring up a command prompt. As an administrator. From there, I can run a utility, tpm vsc mgr.exe, which allows you to create and destroy virtual smart cards. The same utility exists on Windows 8. The whole process works exactly the same on Windows 8 as it does here. So I can do tpm vsc-mgr/destroy, or actually just destroy. I want to make sure that I don't have another one laying around from a previous test. Destroy. Yes, I should probably fix that. Destroy. Nope, there's no existing one there. So then I can do tpm vsc mgr create name my vsc pin prompt. So I don't want it to use the default one. That wouldn't be very secure. Admin key random generate. Now I need to put in my pin. that I want to put on that virtual smart card, and then it will create the device. So that's the easy part. I have a certificate, or I have a virtual smart card now, but it doesn't have any certificates on it. At least I will as soon as the command finishes. So the next step is to actually put certificates on it. So depending on how your organization creates certificates, this gets a little interesting. If you create certificates using Active Directory, say you have Active Directory certificate services up and running, in a lot of cases those are set up for auto enrollment. You could also be using something like Fidelity Identity Manager to create certificates like that. These are effectively workgroup machines, though. They're not in Active Directory. They can't be joined to Active Directory, so it gets to be a little bit more challenging to create the certificates, to enroll the certificates, to put it on this device. You have a couple of options. You can either create the certificate on another machine, export it into a cert file, and then copy it over and import it into the virtual smart card, which is fairly easy to do. Or you can set up in Windows Server 2012, you can set up Active Directory Certificate Services web enrollment capabilities so that we can do that much more easily. So now we've got our smart card. Let me start the certificates MMC. And from there, if I go to Personal, I can say Request New Certificate. And if you're doing this on an Active Directory joined machine, it would show you My Active Directory, and I'd just click Next. But it doesn't know what certificate authorities we have out there, so we had to tell it where to find this one. So the next step would be to add New, where I type in my URI for my certificate machine. Contoso DC, contoso.com. AD, this is a long one to remember, policy, provider, CEP, username, password, service.svc, CEP. Memorize that one. Then you need to tell it that since we're not in Active Directory, we need to specify a username and password, which is easy enough, and then to validate. Oop, now it's saying the server name couldn't be resolved. That's because I need to connect to a different network. Let me connect to my private wireless network up here. And then we'll try again. After we make the wizard happy by changing something, validate again. Okay, so now it's validated. I can click on Add. It now knows that my Contoso environment is what I just added, and it offers me choices of the types of certificates that I can enroll. So this is your standard behavior then for certificate services. I can request a TPM virtual smart card, click Enroll. It found my virtual smart card. Now it prompts me for my PIN, and it begins the enrollment process to put a certificate onto that virtual smart card. So hopefully my virtual smart card service is up and running, and after a few seconds we'll get a certificate back from it that gets installed into that virtual smart card, stored in the TPM to basically provide me credentials that I can use to connect to secured resources. So that was successful. My virtual smart card now has a certificate on it. Next step, let's try to access something secure. So if I go to a web page, this web page is secured. It's asking me to choose a smart card, or really to choose a certificate. I'll click on my smart card, click OK. I need to type in my PIN. And now I have access to that secured web page using my smart card. So not too hard to do. There are command line utilities, that TPM, VSC, mgr.exe to create the virtual smart card, and then a whole variety of ways to put certificates on it. So not too bad to do, but that's the type of process that you would need to go through to leverage those virtual smart cards on a Windows RT device. So we've got these Windows RT devices, and like we talked before, they don't necessarily include the apps that you want to run. And as time goes by, there'll be lots more additional Windows Store apps that will take the place of the traditional desktop applications that you may run today. But in the meantime, you may need to get to those. So the typical process that you would go through is using something like Remote App, where you can have a terminal services environment that publishes these applications where you can run them from a Windows RT device. Makes it fairly easy to seamlessly launch them on Windows RT. Your data stays on the remote server. It doesn't actually come to the Windows RT device, so it's a more secure way of making sure your enterprise data is consumed. And it's not too easy, not too hard to set up. You could also do VDI, which is kind of the same experience, but instead of sharing a terminal server farm, you instead have a full virtual machine at your disposal. Those remote apps, as well as the VDI sessions, can be touch enabled, so you can actually still interact with them by using the touch screen, both for touch apps as well as desktop apps. So you get the full experience coming across those. There have been a lot of optimizations in Windows Server 2012 to make that experience even better for lower bandwidth and higher multimedia type applications. So lots of improvements there. As far as setting that up, if you have an RDS server configured, you can add it to your Windows RT device. So if I go to Settings, Remote App and Desktop Connections, I've already added my server in Contoso RDS, contoso.com, RD web feed, webfeed.aspx. I've added that. It's detected that there are 13 programs that I published from there, which I can see on my start screen. So if I scroll all the way over, this block of apps are the ones being published from my server. So even though I don't have Outlook on my local machine, I do have it here. I can click to launch Outlook. It will launch the remote app. It'll ask me to log in to my domain environment running on that RDS server, and then I can run Outlook as though it were local. So as long as I have a well-connected Windows RT machine, this is a reasonable way of running desktop applications on Windows RT. If I'm using devices that aren't going to be well connected, don't have internet connections, don't have VPN, don't have the ability to easily connect to your corporate environment, then this isn't nearly as useful. So that goes back to the initial discussion that we had about understanding the types of apps, the types of connectivity that you're going to use, so that you can choose the appropriate device based on the requirements of the particular user. So here I'm running Outlook, fairly easy for me to interact with it. I don't actually have a connection to my Exchange environment inside of my little private wireless network, so it doesn't actually show me any email, but this is the standard Outlook experience, which I can touch without any problem. So you can do remote apps like that without too much trouble. Now that is basically using remote desktop. So we're connecting using remote desktop from our Windows RT device into a remote server. We can also do remote desktop connections into other Windows 8 or Windows Server 2012 machines. We include a remote desktop client, the standard MS tsc.exe, as well as a Windows Store app that we can use to connect via remote desktop, which is this one. I could type in the name of my server and make a connection from there. So going from Windows RT into another device, no problem. The other way around, though, from say, a Windows 8 or Server 2012 device, if you wanted to remote connect into Windows RT, you can't. Windows RT doesn't include remote desktop capabilities because those are only provided in Pro and Enterprise SKUs. Windows RT, as well as Windows 8 Core, doesn't include that capability. Remote assistance, the question was, does that include remote assistance? Remote assistance is possible, so yes, you can still do remote assistance. That is supported. So we've looked at remote apps. We've talked a little bit about security. Secure boot, trusted boot are there by default, always enabled. You can't turn them off on a Windows RT device. On a Windows 8 device, you can if you want. We support something called device encryption, which is basically the same BitLocker technology that we have on Windows 7 and Windows 8, but minus some of the more advanced capabilities, like being able to manage it with MBAM, being able to add multiple protectors. We don't have that support in Windows RT. The only thing we have is the TPM protector. So you will initially receive the Windows RT device with the operating system already installed. The device isn't initially encrypted. When you turn it on the first time, it encrypts itself, just like BitLocker would with the OS deployment where you turn it on as the first step in the new OS. As soon as that process is done, there's still no real protection in place, because in order to establish that TPM protector, we want to be able to create a recovery key. And the only way Windows RT will create a recovery key is if you log on to the device with a Microsoft account that has admin rights to the Windows RT device. So you would have to add a Microsoft account that has admin rights, log in with that account, and Windows RT would automatically notice that, well, okay, you're logging on with a Microsoft account that has admin rights. I'll create a recovery key. I'll write that into the SkyDrive that's associated with that Microsoft account, and I'll then establish the TPM protector. At that point, the device is fully encrypted, fully secured. Until that happens, if you never log in with a Microsoft account, device encryption will be on, but the device will be secured using only a clear key, which effectively means that anyone can access the data that's on the device. They could open it up, pop the hard drive out of it, plug it into another machine, and be able to read everything. As soon as you log on with a Microsoft account and it backs up the key and creates the TPM protector, then you don't have to worry about that. It's the same BitLocker encryption that you're used to. We do support picture passwords. We looked at that before. We can also add a PIN, so you can just punch in the numbers instead of typing in a password. Those are both considered convenience logins. You can disable those like we talked about before. We do include the credential locker, so you can save additional user ID and passwords securely inside of Windows. We include the Windows Firewall, a Windows Defender. Network access protection is supported, although there are some limitations in that. If you needed to install any third-party software to fully enable NAP in your environment, you can't do that on Windows RT. So as long as you're only using the inbox NAP components, then you'd be okay. From a governance perspective, we can use Exchange ActiveSync. That allows us to enforce password requirements. We can also do remote content wipe. Now, when we talk about that, though, this isn't a device wipe. So let's say you have a person that has a Windows RT device. They lose it. They contact your help desk. They issue this remote wipe. That remote wipe is actually processed by the Mail app. The Mail app will then delete all the mail, all the contacts, all the calendar appointments, and all the messaging, instant messaging traffic that may be on the machine. It won't wipe any of the rest of the data that's on the device. It doesn't really know what's users' data and what's enterprise data, so it really just wipes the data that's associated with the Mail app, which would be all of the Exchange-related stuff. We can do cloud-based management with Windows Intune, so you can enroll a Windows RT device in Windows Intune. You can integrate Windows Intune with Configuration Manager to give you that single pane of glass for administration, so you can have from your Configuration Manager console control over all of these devices, whether they're managed by Config Manager directly or managed indirectly through Windows Intune. You can deploy apps to Windows RT devices via sideloading. You can push out VPN configurations. You can enforce governance settings the same way that you could with Exchange ActiveSync. You can monitor those. It will report back the compliance details on that so that you can report on those security settings. And it also gathers a fairly complete inventory of the device, including the apps that are installed, the amount of free disk space, the patches that have been applied, that type of information. We also include PowerShell, so you can use PowerShell for mostly configuration and troubleshooting. So it's not the complete version of PowerShell like you would have on Windows 8. You can't interact with .NET, you can't use it to write applications, but you can use it to configure Windows RT and also to troubleshoot issues with Windows RT. There are different capabilities if you were to do just Exchange ActiveSync versus Windows Intune. Most of the capabilities are things like app publishing, the user self-service portal, VPN client push capabilities. Otherwise, the settings controls between Intune and Exchange ActiveSync are very similar. So let's look a little bit at that. In this case, if I look at my device, first I need to connect my device to the company's Intune subscription, which is what this company apps control panel does. So I've already connected this device into Windows Intune, and I've already installed the management app. So if I go back to the start screen, I have the company portal here, which I can launch. That will connect to Windows Intune and show me the apps that have been published by my Intune administrator. These would be the apps that I can install on my device via sideloading. They'll be automatically downloaded from the cloud. They'll be installed on the device. If it needs to install a sideload product key to do that, it'll take care of that. If it needs to import any certificates, it'll take care of that as well. It will basically make sure that the app is ready to go. Now, of course, for that to work, I need to be internet connected again. So off of the private network, back onto the public network. And let's try that again. I don't have single sign-on configured for my Windows Intune environment, so it will ask me for my ID and password. And once I'm logged on, it will be able to show me all the devices that I have that are managed by Windows Intune, as well as all the apps that are available for me to install. So there's a couple of apps that have been published here. If I wanted to install them, I just need to click on the app and then click the install button. It'll download the files from the cloud. It'll install them on the device, and everything would be set to go. Windows Intune is actually licensed by user. So the fact that I have multiple devices here is fine. I can have up to 5 devices for each user that I've licensed for Windows Intune, and all of those can be managed without needing any other additional licenses. So that's fairly easy to do. I went over the details on how to set up those applications in yesterday afternoon session on deploying line of business apps. So if you didn't come to that session, you can check out the recording for that one to get deeper into that conversation. So I mentioned before that we're working on publishing additional content on TechNet, and we're not quite there yet because we've been making revisions to it as we go along, but we do have the Word version of that we were looking at before. Let's pull that up a little bit. Let's view it in reading mode. Get rid of the navigation a little bit. So you can see the types of information that we're trying to provide are a lot of the things that we've gone through here today. We want to talk about the apps and features that are available in the OS, like Office Home and Student. If we look at Office Home and Student, we would say it's licensed for non-commercial use. Commercial use rights are provided automatically when the device is used as a companion, et cetera, and points you to the official licensing documentation that goes along with that. We talk about the Mail app and the limitations that it has, so some of the things that you might miss using that compared to Outlook. In the case of remote wipe, we talked about that. We don't offer a system-level remote wipe. We're only talking about wiping through the app itself. So it's those types of details that we wanted to make sure we provided in the documentation. So all of that's spelled out. We support Adobe Flash. Instead of a limited list of websites, okay, now we support all websites except those that are blacklisted. We do include support for Lync, so you can install the Lync app on a Windows RT device and it can participate in Lync meetings. It can do IM conversations via Lync. The only limitation is that it can't share the Windows RT desktop. In order for Lync to share the desktop, the OS would need to support remote desktop, and Windows RT doesn't support that. We talked about that before. We do support Skype. We do support wireless networks with 802.1x security, as long as you don't need to install any additional third-party software to support that 802.1x authentication. So if you're doing certificate-based authentication or ID and password-based authentication, that will work out fine. We do have some issues with proxy settings. If you're using an authenticated proxy server, either with Windows 8 or Windows RT, you'll run into some challenges. We published some KB articles that describe the workarounds for those. There are now also different sets of proxy settings for the Windows Store apps as compared to Internet Explorer itself. So the Internet Explorer settings aren't used globally by the rest of the applications running on the system, so something to watch out for. We do have VPN capabilities, but like we talked about before, there are some limitations with that. We don't support third-party SSL-based VPNs. We can't install any third-party clients. We can print through corporate print servers, as long as these corporate print servers are running Windows Server 2012 and have installed the latest print drivers, the V4 printer drivers. We've actually created an architecture-neutral printer driver architecture. I think I used architecture way too many times in that sentence, but basically you have a print driver that will run on ARM as well as x86-based devices. You can load those up onto your Server 2012 print server, and your Windows RT devices would be able to print through that without any issues. So it's all of that information that we really wanted to get into this one document, and as we go through, we'll get that configured, or we'll get that converted and placed on the TechNet web pages under Springboard, so that should be out there within the next week or two. We just really want to make sure that enterprises that are considering these Windows RT devices understand what they can and can't do, and make sure that they are only looking at these in appropriate scenarios. Because we've had a variety of customers that have gone out and just bought 200 of them, and then called us up and said, we can't join these to Active Directory. Well, did you read any of the materials about RT before you bought 200 of them? No, we just assumed it was like any other version of Windows. Not quite. As we've talked today, there are limitations with this. This isn't a full pro or enterprise version of Windows. This is effectively a consumer version of Windows that can be leveraged in some scenarios in enterprise spaces. Okay, so with that, I think that's about it. Back to the PowerPoint a minute and confirm that. So that is it. Hopefully that gave you a decent overview of Windows RT. If there are any questions, I think we do have a little bit of time here. If you want to ask any questions related to Windows RT, either shout so that I can hear you up here and repeat your questions, or find the microphones and ask them from there.
I got a question.
Okay, we'll start at the mic.
Is there any technical reason Windows RT couldn't be enhanced down the road to join Active Directory domains?
Is there any technical reason why it can't join a domain? No, it's more of a positioning decision rather than a technical decision. There were some challenges, there were some concerns that if you had Active Directory joined machines with group policy on lower powered devices, that it would significantly impact the battery life of those devices. That issue probably goes away over time as we come up with more creative solutions for that. But it's something that we'll certainly look at in the future to see if that makes more sense, to add more of those pro and enterprise type functions, but nothing really committed yet at this point.
Yeah, what is Microsoft's justification or reasoning behind not allowing you to do a full remote wipe or reset of the device remotely?
So what's the reason why we don't do a full device wipe? I guess it's more of a prioritization of work question. It was just something that we didn't get to in this release of Windows RT, so it's certainly something we understand enterprises want, while we also know that we need to be able to solve the problem of how do you segregate enterprise data from non-enterprise data so that when you wipe the device, your users aren't screaming at you because you deleted all their pictures at the same time you deleted your corporate
That's a
data.
corporate policy, and you're not allowed to put, your own stuff on there. So if you do that
and
at your own risk.
We have to be able to balance that because we know that there will be devices that are corporate owned and corporate controlled and all of that stuff. But there are also going to be BYOD devices that are the property of the employee.
That's
so
true.
We need to be able to handle both scenarios equally well.
So there
Today
are
we
plans,
can handle the mail, but
Yeah.
we can't handle the data. That's something that
Am
we'll
I hearing
work
there
on.
are plans to keep going down that path and try to figure
We
that
certainly
out?
recognize the importance of that, just like your MDM vendors are starting to add those capabilities into the MDM products like AirWatch and Mobile Iron, and those are providing those types of capabilities. So I would expect that, yeah, we would be seriously looking at that as well.
Thank you.
I had a question about the remote apps. When you connected to Outlook, you didn't have to put in any credentials.
I didn't have to specify credentials because I had connected earlier.
Okay.
Normally, because my machine's not Active Directory joined, it would have prompted me to put in my domain credentials and passwords. But just to make sure that my server was working before the session, I had already connected, so it didn't have to prompt again.
And can you configure it to use your virtual smart card or not?
Can you use a virtual smart card? I believe so. There are some limitations doing virtual smart cards with modern apps, but using the desktop apps and using the remote app infrastructure, virtual smart card should work fine. It's not something that I've tried to configure. I should try that now that I have all the pieces up and running on my laptop. It's not nearly as hard to do now. So any other questions?
Can you pre-provision Wi-Fi networks or just VPNs from like Intune or any other MDM?
Yeah, so Intune via Config Manager only does VPN connections. You can't do Wi-Fi connections through that. So you would have to manually define those Wi-Fi connections. You could use PowerShell to do that. The challenge is that it's a little tricky to have Intune run a PowerShell script on a Windows RT device. So we're hoping that we can provide more guidance around how to do that. Then you could package up an app that you could make available via your portal where the user runs that and it creates the Wi-Fi connections using PowerShell scripts. So the question was, can you do mandatory deployments via Windows Intune? You can't using Intune just by itself, but if you connect Intune with Configuration Manager can configure a push deployment to push out applications to a Windows RT device. So you can get that in the hybrid scenario. Yeah, so the comment was, well, Windows RT devices can't be domain joined, so wouldn't you end up with two sets of accounts? Most definitely. So you would either have your domain account and a Microsoft account, or a domain account and a local account. Either way, you're going to have multiple accounts. If you use local accounts, then yeah, they're going to be different for each device. If you use Microsoft accounts, at least you have a consistent username, password, and roaming settings between the devices. So generally, we would recommend you use Microsoft accounts to log on to Windows RT so that you get that type of experience. If you forget your password, you can contact Microsoft support and have them reset it. So you get some of the capabilities that you would have in your Active Directory environment, but it's not your Active Directory environment. It's separate. Okay. I don't see anything else, but then again, the lights are blinding. One in the center.
I got one more. Are there any options for remote troubleshooting? You have a client out in the field, the thing breaks. Is there anything you can do to connect to the machine or work on it?
The question was, are there any options for remote troubleshooting? And yeah, there is one. You can do remote assistance. So the user could send a remote assistance request to your help desk. Once your help desk receives that, they could use that to connect back into the device and go through the problem with the user. So their standard remote assistance functionality is available. Okay, if there are any other questions, feel free to come up front after the session. Otherwise, please fill out your evaluations, and thanks for coming.